Now, something you don't see very often, parents disciplining their children. It took us a long time to find people who would share some of their most private moments they have at home. And maybe you understand why. Probably no one likes to spank their children, but most people do it anyway. And does that make it okay? Or does the hurt last longer than parents realize? Well, consider those important questions as you watch John Stossel's provocative report. But keep in mind, these parents, like you, love their children, even when they lose their temper.
Now?
How do you discipline your children? Do you hit them?
This is not a joke, okay?
Most Americans do. And why not? There's a long tradition of spanking kids to teach them.
Right here!
The Bible recommends it. Withhold not correction from the child. He'll do better if thou beatest him with the rod. The old woman in the shoe knew what to do. She whipped them all soundly and put them to bed. Could hundreds of years of nursery rhymes, tradition, and the Bible be wrong? Today, most every researcher who studied spanking says, yes, they are wrong.
It's probably the best kept secret of American child psychology, that spanking kids produces kids that are more trouble, more hassle for parents, less well-behaved, and besides that, you're putting them at risk, not a very great risk, but at risk of severe problems when they grow up.
Sociologist Murray Strauss has spent the past 20 years studying parents' child-rearing techniques. His surveys, and those done by others, have consistently found that parents who spanked were more likely to have trouble with their kids later. Furthermore, kids who were spanked frequently liked themselves less and had trouble making friends. As adults, they were more likely to act violently, and perhaps because they had come to associate hitting with love, they were more likely to seek relationships with people who were abusive toward them. No wonder most experts now tell people, don't spank. Yet few Americans follow this advice. A Parenting Magazine survey found most parents spank their kids at least once every few months. Despite all the advice saying, don't hit your kid, most Americans spank regularly.
84% of Americans feel that it's sometimes necessary to give a child a good hard spanking. So it's part of our cultural norms, but it's wrong.
So what do you do instead? Well, the experts recommend other forms of discipline. A timeout, taking away a privilege, reprimands and a strong voice. It'll work, they say. You just have to keep doing it.
If you can't share it, maybe we won't get any, right?
Linda and Steve Worsthorn say, yes, it does work, but it's not enough. The Worsthorns and 3 other families agreed to let our cameras watch them for several days so we could see the way they discipline their kids.
Stop it.
All 4 families believe the so-called experts are wrong, that sometimes you just need to spank.
Oh, no.
Linda and Steve have 3 daughters. On this night, 3-year-old Lindsay won't stop tormenting her sister. After several warnings, Linda orders Lindsay to stay in her bed for a timeout. Lindsay, however, won't obey.
Now, I told you not to open that. This is not a joke, okay?
The spanking seems to make a bigger impression.
Sit here until I tell you can open that door.
But the spanking doesn't really change the behavior.
Number one, you're lying to me, all right? I don't like that. Okay?
Another day, Lindsay knocks over her other sister. Her father tries the timeout.
Okay?
Lindsay gets mad and throws her shoe at him.
Give me my shoe back.
Okay, not to throw.
That gets her to obey. Now she hands him the shoe.
The experts would say that by hitting her, you're teaching her that violence works. This just encourages her to throw more shoes.
Well, the experts should be here around dinner time,
I also-
okay, or like bath time, because I've read the books. I know what they say. All right, we're talking real life here. I don't think it's violence to spank a child on the bottom to show them I am in control here, not you.
We're not spanking her to hurt her. We're spanking them to let her know that we're serious. That now she knows we're serious.
You can't just all the time be sitting there saying, please don't put your sister's head in a toilet bowl because she's going to drown. Okay, you just can't. If she does it, she's got to get a spank.
Nancy Fox would agree with that. Nancy's a single mother with a 6-year-old daughter, Samantha. On this night, Samantha keeps breaking the rules. She insists she sleep wearing a hat and kicks out when her mother tries taking the hat away.
Don't do that. Don't kick me. Good. Well, then don't kick me.
Sit down.
Daylene Baxter's technique
Now.
is to count to
1,
3 before spanking.
2.
Here, 3-year-old Katie keeps trying to turn on the TV after Daylene warned her not to.
Didn't I tell you earlier to ask? I'm the mom. I know what's best. And I think a lot of the problems today are that too many parents want to be friends with their children rather than being a parent. Tell Mama sorry for you. Okay, the way I raise Katie is working just fine.
Love you. Oh, Johnny, let me see you do that because I'll bust your ass.
Of the families who invited us to observe, it was the Stiles who spanked most.
Don't cheat.
Rebecca and Smiley Stiles have 4 kids, all girls. 6-month-old Raven, 2-year-old Desi, and 4-year-old twins, Ashley and Jordan. Here, Ashley hadn't cleaned up her room.
Didn't I tell you?
Jordan will be hit because she ran into the alley.
Get up there.
Ashley doesn't pay attention.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
Desi is picking her nose.
Do not put your fingers in your nose and then put them in your mouth. That's nasty.
Seems like
That is nasty.
somebody's getting spanked almost all the time.
Not all the time.
Well, there's certain things that they haven't learned yet.
Ashley plays with her food.
Eat.
Desi doesn't eat her lunch.
You want to sit there right and eat?
The Stiles say they tried disciplining the kids the way the experts recommend.
Let's try the timeout chair and the privileges and taking it away, you know. Oh, please, give me a break. That didn't work. It seemed to have gone from bad to worse.
So why do the experts say this?
It might work for some people, but it doesn't work for us.
Jordan hits Ashley, so Mom spanks Jordan.
You like to hit? Come here. You like to hit?
Ashley pulls Jordan's hair, so Mom pulls
You like
Ashley's
to pull
hair.
hair? Well, then
You're
go
teaching
pull
them
her
that the
hair.
way to solve problems is to hit.
Yeah, I thought about that. But no, we teach them that sometimes you're punished for something you do. Better being hit now than electrocuted in an electric chair later.
Until they get spanked, they won't
They don't
realize, hey,
understand
this
no
is,
means no.
you know, this is wrong. Most of these kids growing up that don't get spanked, they're uncontrollable.
There's a fine line between spanking and abusing your children. There's a very fine line. And it's easy when you're angry to cross that line. We don't go that far. We're very careful.
Dad spanks Desi for dirtying her training pants.
Bad. You know better than that.
Can't she forget? She's only 2 years old.
Yes, she can forget, but there's certain signs with her that I know that she knows what she's doing.
You think she does this just to bother you?
No, not particularly to bother me, but to just be bad.
But that's why they're called training pants, because she's still learning.
Right, but she does know.
Sometimes in the Stiles house, you see fear in the kids.
You want any more than 3?
Here their father calls them, come get your spanking.
I suggest you get over here, honey.
They want to obey, but they hold back.
I'm tired of telling you. Don't ignore me!
It looks as if your children fear you. They're cringing, afraid to come near you.
Move your hand. Well, when they do something bad, they should. They should have some type of fear. Move your hand, little 5. Move your hand. I think fear restrains them from doing, bad things.
The child care experts say if children behave out of fear, that they will never learn to behave for the right reasons, just because it's right.
No, I think that's bull too.
I don't care if they learn it for the right reason or not, as long as they learn it.
It's almost as if you're abusive, that you're cruel.
It might look cruel, but it'd be more cruel not to, and let them grow up to be what I call evil little brats. I mean, I see kids now that are, downright evil and cruel to each other. My children are not.
When they Although the Stiles and the other parents felt that what they were doing was right, they agreed to meet with Dr. Strauss and Dr. Peter Favaro, a psychologist who regularly works with families. First, we played excerpts of the videotape we'd shot. Both experts had watched the Stiles tape previously and said they were very upset by it. Favaro said he considers this kind of frequent spanking abusive, and he fears for the children. When they were with the Stiles, however, both experts were more diplomatic.
I have worked with parents who have unintentionally injured their children while spanking them, and then they feel terrible about it afterwards.
Neither of us spank when we're angry.
No, we don't,
we have time out first. Then we talk about it.
You appear to me to be angry.
I love something else to work because it makes me feel worse than it makes them feel to do it.
I believe that.
But nothing else
yeah,
seems
especially
to
in a
work.
dangerous...
Strauss and Favaro pointed out that the spanking doesn't really work either. The proof is that the parents have to keep spanking because the behavior doesn't change.
Oh,
Which is, most of the time it has not worked.
Most of the time it has, yes.
Yes,
I
it
think,
does.
why do you have to keep spanking them?
Okay?
Then they looked at the worst torn tape. They complimented the worst torns for using lots of timeouts and lectures, but criticized them for spanking Lindsay when she resisted the timeout.
I told you not to throw it, okay? I told you not to throw it. Now, here, you hand me the shoe nicely. With all this time out and everything else, if I tell her to stay in bed, she gets off her bed, that's got to be handled. I mean, if that's, it's not doing her any good if I say, yeah, go upstairs, and she doesn't go.
But the way to not tolerate it is not by doing just exactly what you're telling the child not to do, namely hit someone. You're telling the child it's very wrong to hit other people, and then you spank her, you hit her.
How do they learn to differentiate that what you're doing is right and what they're doing is wrong?
So what does he do about the shoe?
You do just what you did, but without the hitting, and then when she gave you the other shoe, you reward her for that, and you say, oh, that's good.
That's nice.
Yeah, nothing works all the time. But the hitting doesn't work all the time either.
The advice to Nancy was a little different. Lighten up, they said. You don't need so many rules.
Something, pick and choose your battles carefully, you know. And that, I would say, well, what would the downside have been to letting her sleep in a hat? She would have gotten hot, she would have taken it off.
There's nothing wrong with the child getting their own way.
I just would have thought, well, if it was the hat, then tomorrow it's going to be something else.
I think you have to spank sometime.
But let's have an example of when you have to spank, and we'll deal with that.
How do you stop the child from running out into the street?
You run out, you grab the child, you take it back, you do everything you can. That message is communicated. You just leave out the hitting part.
Jordan! The anxiety in your voice, they say, will spell it out as well as a spanking.
When you leave the house, when the child doesn't run out in the street, you say, that's great, you didn't run in the street.
Just leave out the hitting part. Discipline doesn't mean hitting. It means teaching kids what's right and what's wrong.
After about 2 hours of this, the parents left, saying they'd think about what the doctors said.
I don't think these parents bought your point today.
No, they didn't, nor do most Americans. Perhaps the best way of saying what's wrong with spanking is that you'll have less trouble with your children. You'll have less hassle with your kids, and you'll have better behaved kids if you use non-spanking methods of teaching and training them.
Again, what are those methods?
You on this side, you on this side.
First, set clear rules, but not too many. Playing with food, for example, is normal for a 3-year-old. So let them. Why create battles?
You can't do that. It might break.
Second, talk to kids. Lots of talk. Kids hate lectures almost as much as spankings. If the child won't listen, demand a timeout.
All right, so you just call yourself down.
Take them away from where they want to be, where everyone's playing. Fourth, reward good behavior.
Sit on it right. Thank you. That's better.
It's less natural to say, thank you for not fighting with your sister, but it makes an impression. These techniques do take more time than spanking, but the experts say, please, take the time. It's worth it.
If you do